Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. So anybody who's joining watching the live feed might be a little surprised that you don't see Holly and today's scheduled session, which is My Life in the Amazon. Unfortunately, Holly's in Peru in the Amazon, and internet's just not as reliable as it is, say, here in Canada or the United States. So we tried a few times this morning to make it work, but the connection just didn't work out for us. So what I'm going to do today instead is I'm going to share some of my adventures from around the world. So I'm an avid scuba diver. I love the oceans, and I've been scuba diving since 2007. I've been some pretty cool places around the world. So again, I'm sorry Holly couldn't make it. The internet connection in Peru just wasn't with us. But we are going to schedule a session, a makeup session in March when she's visiting Scotland. So when she's back home for a month, and we should have a much better connection then, and she'll be able to share her adventures from the Amazon for you. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and I'm going to go through some pictures of some places I've been. We'll share a little bit of video, and then I'll take some questions from the classrooms joining. So here we go. Okay, so I'm going to turn on a microphone. Let's see. Mrs. O'Connor's class, or group, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
When I pop that up, were you able to see me diving for a minute?
Yes, we were.
All right, well, let's go for it then. All right. So let's go full screen. And please do turn on your microphone if something's not working, but I think it should be okay. So this is a picture of me, and I'm pretty excited. I lived in Australia for a year in 2007 while my wife went to teachers college, and that's where I started diving. So my first ever dive was on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and I was lucky to have someone along, the dive instructor, who did have a camera and was able to take a picture. So pretty happy to have a picture of my very first dive. Since then, I've been diving in lots of places around the world. Here's a diving selfie. This is a picture of me in Cozumel, a little selfie in the nice, clear Caribbean waters. Sometimes, though, I'll free dive, so I'll go just with my mask and snorkel and hold my breath and see how deep down I can go. And this is actually a picture of a beautiful lake in Australia on Fraser Island called Lake Mackenzie. And if you dive down to the bottom, about 25 feet down, the bottom of the lake was covered in turtles. So I brought one up to get a closer look. And you can see he's there. And then I put him back down with his buddies. Sometimes you find neat things while you're diving. So this is actually a lake in Ontario, and somebody had left a bike behind, thrown into the water. So I thought, why not? Let's see what scuba diving and riding a bike is like. And it's a little bit hard with the bottom. The bottom's kind of soft, but it's kind of neat to try something new. And then, of course, we took the bike out of the water. We didn't want to leave it behind. The first little bit of pictures that I'm going to show you are from some of my dives in Australia. So like I said, my first dive was on the Great Barrier Reef, and pretty amazing. It's the largest living structure on the planet, and it's the only structure made by living things that's actually visible from space, which is pretty unique. So it stretches for 2,300 kilometers, and it's not one big reef. It's actually a series of about 3,000 reefs and about 900 islands. And for something so big, it was actually created by really, really tiny creatures called polyps, and they build up over tens of thousands of years, the reef, to the levels that they are now. First picture that I have to share is I love sharks. So some might know that I also work with a group called Sharks for Kids. So anytime I'm in the water and I get to see a shark is a great time for me. So this is a blacktip reef shark, and one of the first sharks I was ever able to swim with. And he was just had no interest in me. He actually came in, took one look at me, and took off. So I actually had to follow him a little bit to get a couple pictures. But he definitely wasn't interested. Here's a couple more reef sharks. So this was on another dive, and you can see the little line in the corner. When we go down the line, usually it'll be attached to the boat and go down, might be anchored to the bottom, and that gives you something to follow. And these guys were curious, just came in to check out what was happening, who these people were invading their environment. So there's a couple more kind of looking up at them. And then, I mean, there's so many other fish. These are reef fish, so these are called parrotfish. And when you dive somewhere like the Great Barrier Reef, it's not quiet. You'd think it would be quiet, but obviously you hear your bubbles, but there's crunching, crunch, 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 almost like somebody crunching cereal. And that's what these guys do. These parrotfish nibble on the reef for some food, crunch, 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 and then, believe it or not, they poop out sand. So you'll be watching them swim along, and the rock they couldn't digest comes out as sand. And most beaches in tropical area have passed through a parrotfish or some other species of fish, so broken down by fish eating it. So think about that next time you're on the beach, that it's actually that sand very well could have passed through a parrotfish. Anyone who's seen Finding Nemo will recognize these guys, some little clownfish hanging out in their home. Always fun to watch on the reef. And then this is a clam. So most of you are probably familiar with clams you might find in a lake. And a clam in a lake is probably 4 or 5 centimeters long. Well, this clam is called a giant clam. It's called a giant clam because it's over 1 meter in length. That's a pretty big clam. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is a green sea turtle. Nice shallow water, swimming over the coral. And I mean, this is why I dive, is for experiences like this, where you get to spend time with this kind of marine life so close. And it's so different from if I went for a walk in the forest. I might see a rabbit, I might see a deer, but they're going to run away pretty quickly. Whereas when you're in the underwater environment, the animals are so much more comfortable, and you can get much, much closer without disturbing them. So green sea turtle, just a beautiful, beautiful species. And then we have some stingrays, which are always neat to see. This is a blue-spotted stingray, and he's just relaxing on the bottom. Whitetip reef shark, and lots of these guys. So on the reefs in Australia, they're very common. And as well, when I did a little diving in Fiji, they were very common there as well. So these pictures have actually switched to Fiji. So there's the white-tip reef shark. You see we have a little photo bomb in the left corner. Someone's peeking in. And, you know, the big stuff's really cool, but sometimes the small little fish are just as interesting. Sometimes it's fun to spend a dive right near the bottom and looking in cracks and crevices to see what you might see. And this pair were definitely cool to see. I have a little video here. Let's see if it'll play. Oh, media not found. I'll have to come back to that one. I will come back to that one because I do have it on YouTube. Let's see. All right. And like I said, some of the smaller things are the neatest. So this is a little nudibranch, and no bigger than my thumb, beautiful colors. And if you look at the back, their name means naked lungs, which means that their lungs aren't inside like ours. Ours are in our chest. You can actually see, if you look towards his rear, you can see the little frills coming off. Those are actually the nudibranch's lungs, and it's able to take dissolved oxygen out of the ocean. Oh, these guys are really cool. These guys are called cuddlefish. So they're almost like a cross between an octopus and a squid, a cuddlefish. And they were very, very relaxed, really curious about who I was and what I was doing in the water, just as curious as I was about them. There's another little picture. This is a cool fish. This is a scorpion fish. And at first, I didn't know it was there. They blend in so well with their surroundings on the reef, you could swim over them most of the time and never know they're there. But there are fish you have to be careful around because they do have spines on their body to protect themselves, and those spines are venomous. So beautiful to look at, but definitely not something you want to touch. And wonderfully adapted to camouflage. A few pictures I'm going to show you now are from a little island called Cozumel. Cozumel is a beautiful island in the Gulf of Mexico, which has some of the neatest drift diving I've ever done. So drift diving just means you jump in the water and you don't even have to kick. There's a little current that runs along the reef, like the current in a river, and it carries you along the reef. And so you can dive for longer because you're not wasting energy. And the boat doesn't wait for you. The boat goes further down the reef and tries to guess kind of where you're going to pop up. So the captain has to be very careful to watch your bubbles and keep track of where the divers are because you're moving the whole time. Really cool kind of diving. Peeking in the sponges, you could often find neat little things like arrow crabs. And you can see this guy's pretty curious. He's reaching out towards the camera. A lot of the reefs, when you went down to the base of them, had caverns that you could swim through. So, yeah, that was a new experience for me, being over 100 feet down in the ocean, but then going into these little caverns through the reefs and seeing some of the life that lives on the sides of the caverns. There's another little picture doing the same thing, kind of moving through a passageway. And here's an eel. These guys are always fun to see. They're actually found this guy while I was snorkeling. He was curled up in a little rock on the bottom. So you never know what you're going to come across. The snorkeling, there was lots of really neat fish. But right at the end of the snorkel, I peeked underneath the side of this rock. And sure enough, there was somebody in there looking back. Here's another species of shark. This is the nurse shark. And he was hiding out in a little cavern because they do come out at night. They are nocturnal. That's when they do their hunting. Really cool species of shark because they're able to rest on the bottom and still pump oxygen through their gills. So a lot of species of sharks need to keep moving and to keep the water passing through their gills, keep the oxygen moving. The nurse shark is a species that can lay at the bottom and pump the oxygen over. A couple pictures of some schools of fish. As you can see, there's no shortage of biodiversity when you're down on a coral reef. All kinds of different species. You might have to look for this one, but this is a stingray showing off its camouflage skills. Almost swam right over him, but a little easier to see him when the flash lights up the picture. But without the flash, you could very easily pass over if you don't notice the little eyes. That's sometimes the best way to spot them, is to see the little eyes moving while you're swimming over. This is a splendid toadfish. Really cool fish. Usually only comes out at night, and they kind of hide under these rocky ledges during the day. And Cozumel, the little island in Mexico, is the only place in the world you can find them. So they're called an endemic species because they're found nowhere else in the world. They're just found in one spot. More sea turtles. This is a hawksbill sea turtle. So you'll notice the color's not as good in this one, and that's because the deeper you go in the water, the more colors you lose, because the light has different wavelengths. So the red goes first, and then you kind of lose your oranges and yellows, and then once you get deep enough, it's just blue until you slowly kind of fade into darkness when the sun's light doesn't reach any further. So once you get to a certain depth, the pictures do come out a little bit bluer. This is a baby hawksbill sea turtle. He was about the size of a dinner plate. And then I did some night diving. So we hop in the boat, we head out into the water in the dark, and turn on our flashlights and just jump into the ocean. And wow, it's incredible. You can turn your flashlights off and you're just in total darkness. You have no idea what's around you. It's such a cool feeling. And the neat thing about diving at night is the night shift comes out. So all the animals out during the day tuck themselves away for the evening, and then out come the nocturnal animals, the night shift. So this is a lobster working his way around the reef. This one's a little harder to see. This is a nurse shark. So he just kind of slipped in at the edge of my flashlight, so I barely got a picture of him. But it was neat to see sharks at night. That was the first time I'd ever been diving with sharks at night. Really cool was this octopus. So I was able to follow him on the reef for a little while and moving around, hunting for little crabs, little fish. And if you see from some of these pictures, always changing shape, changing color, really moving almost like a fluid through the water. Really neat to see, and I felt really lucky to get to spend so much time with this animal. This was unexpected. So I'm holding my flashlight, and this is a picture of little worms all around us. So they're attracted to the light and just kind of zipping around, and you could feel them on your fingers, kind of just moving across. Really, really tiny, but really, really attracted to the lights. A couple more pictures of a moray eel, kind of peeking out from under the rock. Anyone know pufferfish? This is what a pufferfish looks like when it's relaxed and calm. And this is how a pufferfish defends itself when it gets frightened. So it fills itself with water, the spikes stand on end. And I don't know about you, but if I were another fish, I don't think that looks too tasty or appealing. A couple little stingrays, about the size of dinner plates, so much smaller than some of the bigger species can get. Another real cool thing about diving is wreck diving. So that's when you dive on a ship, may have went down in a storm, may have hit a reef or some rock. Sometimes people even sink ships on purpose. When the ship's no longer of any use, they'll clean it up and they'll sink it as an artificial reef, creating a home and a whole new ecosystem on the bottom of the ocean floor. So these pictures were actually in Tobermory, which is in Canada, in Georgian Bay, Lake Huron area of the Great Lakes. And this ship went down, it's called the Forest City, went down in a storm, and it's laying on an angle. That's why this picture looks funny. So the ship, the front of the ship starts at 60 feet, and you can swim all the way down to the end of the ship, which is at about 155 feet deep. Very dark and very cold, but the cold water keeps the wrecks nice and intact, so it's neat to see. This is another picture swimming along that same wreck. You can see the outer wall, or the outer wall of the hull, the side of the ship. And there's a few of us making our way down. And this is the rear of the ship. So at about 155 feet down at the mud is where this ship, the back of it sits. You can even see some of the railings still intact on the ship. There's a little view from a little bit further back. So it was a wooden ship, and the cold water has kept it intact, where somewhere warmer in the tropics, the bacteria and other things would have gotten at it and broken down the wood much quicker. There's me and my dive buddy. I'm on the left. You can see my yellow spotlight. All right, so those are the pictures that I wanted to show you. I'm just going to stop sharing screen for 1 second. Let's go back to me. All right, so what'd you think? Did you like those pictures? Give me a thumbs up if you like those pictures. All right, that's what I like to see. So I'm going to play a couple short little videos, and then we'll do some questions. So just give me a second to share again, and I'll pull up the videos. And I'll talk during them too, so you know what I'm sharing. All right, so you should be able to see that now. Okay, let's play the stingray one first. I was going to play this one before, but it wasn't cooperating. So this is in Australia, and you'll see 3 stingrays in this video. This was, there were some free divers who were cleaning some fish on the shore. So they were throwing the extras in the water, and that's what brought the stingrays so close. They were massive stingrays. This guy's smaller, but the other ones were easily as big as 2 or 3 of your desks. They were really big stingrays. So there's 1, 2, and here comes the third one. Love watching them move through the water. It's almost like they're flying, just gliding through the water. All right. This next little clip that I'll show you is what it's like to be inside a shipwreck. So this wreck is called the Wexford. It's in Lake Huron. It's about 70 to 80 feet below the water. And a little silty right now because the fin kicking did kick up a little silt. But once we get into the main passageway, you'll get a little bit of a better view of what it's like moving through a shipwreck. There we go. So you can see my dive buddy in front. You always dive with a partner because that way if something goes wrong with your gear, you have somebody who can help you out. So a lot of accidents happen when people don't follow that rule. Diving is actually a very, very safe sport if you follow the rules and if you do the training. But some people don't follow the rules, and that can lead to trouble. So this ship went down in a storm about 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago now, in Lake Huron. So I don't have the video handy right now, but a couple summers ago I was in North Carolina, and we hopped on a boat. We went about 25 miles out into the ocean, and we dove on a submarine. Off the coast of North Carolina, there's a German U-boat that was sunk by the Coast Guard during World War II. And I've been on a lot of wrecks, but there's just amazing to be actually diving on a shipwreck like that on a German U-boat. Pretty amazing. This is one of my favorite videos. This was just from last March, during the March break. So I went to Bimini, and some of you may have had lessons with Jillian from Sharks for Kids, and so that's who I went down to see. I went to spend a little bit of time with Jillian and Duncan, and we did some diving with the Hammerhead Sharks. So we'll just watch this for a little minute so you can see them moving through the water. Just amazing, amazing creatures. And it was almost like being at an airport. So we're kneeling on the bottom in the sand, and just one right after another, they'd come in. They'd each take their turn. So there could be 7 or more at a time, but they'd all come in one at a time. So you can see one leaves and the other one comes in. This one leaves, and you'll see another one already coming in to take its spot. So sharks are very polite, and they're very well organized, and they take their turns. So you can see the diver does have a little bit of cut up fish, and he doesn't give them much, but just having it in the water in his little bait box is enough to keep them curious and interested and swimming around us. So this is in Bimini, a little island in the Bahamas, about 50, 60 miles off the coast of Florida. And I got to spend about 6 hours in total in the water with these guys. And then the last clip I'll share with you is we're at a marina. This is in Bimini as well. And you always think a shark's further out in the ocean, but this is right in the marina, right next to the restaurant we were eating. And this bull shark, so bull sharks are can be very, very big sharks. They're very stocky, so they're very wide around. So this guy probably would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 feet long, but at least 3 feet or more thick. He was a big, big, stocky shark. And we were having our supper, and we could watch him right in the marina. So it's just a short little clip. You'll see him pop up in a second. There he is, swimming underneath. So you might be wondering what you saw splash in the water, and actually one of the reasons it's there is the kitchen is right next to the water. So when the chef has an extra piece of fish that's not going out on a plate, you might toss it over, and it's very quickly taken advantage of by whoever's nearby. So let me come back and let's talk to some of the classrooms. There we go, I'm back. Okay, well, let's grab a few questions. So let's start off with, let's visit our grade 2s in Illinois. And I believe there's a handful of classes together today, 3 classes, I think. How's it going, guys?
Yes.
Mrs. Murray's group, do you have some questions?
Go ahead, Zach.
All right.
Where was your first scuba dive?
Where was my first? Well, when I was in Australia, I lived in a little place called, or a state called New South Wales, and right on top of that to the north was a place called Queensland. And Queensland is basically where the Great Barrier Reef runs along. It runs along the coast. So my very first dive was actually on a reef there called Norman's Reef. And yeah, it was just, I remember every moment of it from this day, and got to see whitetip nurse sharks, a green sea turtle, some really neat little things called Christmas tree worms, which you'll have to look up if you want to see. They kind of come out, they're nice and frilly, beautiful colors, and when you get too close to them, they pull right in, and they disappear. So that's something you should check out, maybe on YouTube or something. Thanks for the question.
Hi, my name is Kendra. How did the sharks kill you if they're sharks?
Okay, well, you know, that's a really, really good question, and a lot of people would ask that question because they have a view of sharks that they may have seen in the media or on TV or heard from other people. But in reality, every shark that I've ever been swimming with or diving with has been more afraid of me than I have been of the shark. Sharks live in the ocean. They've been in our oceans for hundreds of millions of years, and they eat fish. Some of the bigger sharks eat things like sea lions or sea turtles, but on a whole, their diet is fish. So something like a diver in the water making lots of bubbles, they don't usually stick around. They recognize this as something that's not usual, and humans aren't on a shark's menu. So things do happen. There are shark incidents, shark encounters, but a lot of them happen are cases of mistaken identity. So picture you being a shark, and you're swimming along the bottom of the ocean, and you're looking up for your food. You're looking up, you see the outline, you're looking for the outline of a seal or the outline of a sea turtle. Somebody sitting on a surfboard are going to look a lot like a seal or a sea turtle. So the shark comes up and takes a bite and usually realizes its mistake. That's why most people actually survive shark attacks. There's probably about 100 a year around the whole world, and most survive. I think the average is about 5 people a year are killed by sharks. But do you know how many sharks we kill a year? Do you have a guess?
No.
No? Humans kill upwards 75 to 100 million sharks a year. That's a lot of sharks for their fins, right? They put them in something called shark fin soup, sometimes just for sport fishing. Sometimes they get caught in fisherman's net by accident, and sharks don't really like that, so they don't usually survive. So that's called bycatch. So I've never, ever, ever come across a shark that I was ever worried about or nervous about. Usually they don't stick around. They kind of see the divers and they head away. So actually more people a year fall out of their chairs and die than get attacked by sharks. So be careful when you're leaning in your classroom on your chairs. All right, great questions. I'm just going to zip over to Mrs. Zamora's class because they have to leave for lunch shortly. So let's steal a question or two from them before they have to go.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No worries. Thanks for sticking around.
Of course.
Hi, my name is Angel. Hi, my name is Angel. Have you ever been in a situation where a shark wanted to bite you?
Have I ever been in a situation where a shark wanted to bite me? No, not even close. Most of the pictures I showed you of those reef sharks, of the nurse sharks, they kind of come in to take a look, right? It's something new in their environment, and they just turn around and usually just leave. You saw the video with those big hammerhead sharks, and even though they were coming right up, and sometimes they even bump into me as they were swimming past, they never wanted to bite. They just, really, I was in the water and I just wasn't that interesting to them. They were more interested in what was sitting in the little bait bucket. Was there any tasty scraps for them? So, yeah, never have I had anything like that happen, or even close.
Hi, my name is Sophia. So far during when you have been scuba diving, what is your favorite sea animal that you have been very close to?
That's a really, really, really tough question. When I was with the hammerheads, that was pretty amazing. I always wanted to get in the water with really, really big sharks like that, so that was a great experience. In Australia, I really wanted to see a leafy sea dragon. And, my dive instructor said maybe if we get lucky we'll see one. And I did 4 dives that day and didn't see anything. And it wasn't until the very last dive that we spotted one just kind of sitting in the seaweed. So that was probably one of the coolest things I've been looking for that I was able to see. So look it up online if you do have a chance. A weedy sea dragon. There's also leafy sea dragons. And they look like bigger seahorses with frills that come off of them for camouflage. So definitely check them out. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you. And for sharing with us today.
All right. Well, you guys enjoy your lunch. Let's visit Mrs. O'Connor's class or group in Thunder Bay.
Thank you so much. We have a couple questions.
All right.
So right here.
Hi, my name is Lola, and have you ever seen a shark? Have you ever seen a shark that you don't want to swim with?
Have I ever seen a shark I don't want to swim with? Easy answer for that is no. Anytime I've ever been snorkeling or on a boat or scuba diving, I always hope that I do get to see one. So I have a feeling if I saw something really big, like maybe a 20-foot great white shark, I might be a little bit nervous, but at the same time, I don't know if I'd be able to stop myself from getting in to get a closer look because, yeah, they're sharks you don't get to see all the time because they are endangered. Good question.
Thank you so much. We have another question.
Sure.
Hi, have you ever swam with dolphins?
Not yet. When I was in the Bahamas, it was winter, which isn't a great time for seeing them. So it would have been spotted dolphins. And there was a small chance we might have come across some, but it never did happen. So if you do go to the Bahamas in the summer months, those are much better times. You've got a much better chance of swimming with wild dolphins during that time. And again, dolphins are very curious, so they'll come over and they'll want to see what you're up to. But they will stick around longer than sharks. Sharks usually move on.
Thank you so much.
Let's steal one more.
Hello, my name is Ayla, and what's your favorite place to dive?
That's a good question. I don't think I can pick a favorite because I've been to so many different spots, and every spot has something unique. So Cozumel, being able to get into the water and drift. So not even having to kick. It was like I was flying over top of the coral reefs with the current. Australia, on the Great Barrier Reef, seeing hundreds of different kinds of fish and other sea creatures was pretty amazing. I spent some time in Fiji, which is another beautiful place to dive. And then I love diving in Canada and the US because there's shipwrecks. You don't see as much fish if you're in a lake. You see a little bit, but you get to see so many really neat shipwrecks and see a little bit of history on the bottom of the lake. Good question, but I just can't pick one spot because I haven't come across a place yet that I didn't like diving.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's visit our class here. Let me turn your mic on. Mrs. Bark's class? Yep. All right, so you guys have some questions?
Hi, my name's Jonah, and my question is, have you ever got stung by a stingray?
Have I ever gotten stung by a stingray? No. I have a friend who did once. He was walking in the water, and he stepped on one. So the stingray defended itself. He did get stung in the foot. But stingrays only sting in defense. So you'd never be swimming and have one chase you so it could sting you. Usually you've either cornered it or stepped on it is usually when people get stung. So when you do walk in shallow water and there might be stingrays, you're supposed to drag your feet in the sand. And when you drag your feet in the sand, that scares them away so you don't end up stepping on them. Good question. So this is, I forgot to say, this is another class from Thunder Bay, and they're a grade 6 class.
Okay. You should have been ready. Hi, my name is Owen, and my question is, what has been your most dangerous scuba diving trip, and what happened during it?
Okay, well that's actually a good question, because even though you take lots of precautions, you do lots of training, you are in a pretty wild environment in the ocean, and things do happen. So actually that trip to North Carolina, we went out. It was very, very stormy that day. Actually on our way out we saw some water spouts in the distance, so tornadoes on the water, but they were far away. We were very lucky because the weather stayed clear enough for us to dive, and so the wreck was very far out. It was 25 miles away from the shore. There was a strong, strong ocean current, so you have to be really careful. Oh, there's just an announcement, guys. We'll let it play.
Everyone please stop and listen. There were a lot of snowballs being thrown around at recess, and the lunchtime supervisors have assured me that they have spoken to many students. The lunchtime supervisors should not even
Just wait till this announcement finishes.
our students, as our students are all aware that there are no throwing of snowballs.
Sounds like there was some snowball throwing at recess.
We have 470 students in the playground, and all it takes is one snowball to hurt a child, blind a child, and that is not worth throwing any snowballs.
Sorry, guys, just an announcement in the background. Okay.
Make sure I do not have to make this announcement again. Thank you.
Okay, I think it's done. So back to the story. It was over 100 feet, 118 feet down, so you had to be really careful. There's a really strong current. Your air doesn't last very long when you're that deep and working that hard, so you have to use all your training. And on that same dive, a diver did get carried away by the current. So we were lucky, which we got back up to the surface, and we were able to spot her about 500 meters from the boat. So she was drifting away pretty quickly. And we were able to use a long line that the diver went on, the master diver, and he was able to retrieve her, and we were able to reel them back into the boat. So I think that was the dive where maybe the most dangerous, just because of the strong currents and the deep water. And then we did have to rescue a diver that day.
Use this
Good question.
as well.
and also just be lucky.
Just reported there are lots of students running around on the play.
So one more question maybe, and then we'll have to wrap things up.
Where the slides are.
How many sharks do you see?
How many sharks?
During winter. There should be no students running through it. Because we do not.
Sorry guys, the announcements again. Sounds like people weren't very good at recess at my school. Doesn't sound like it was very. All right, I think we're done.
So this is a reminder again.
Maybe not.
Do not play tag. Do not cut.
So I'll try and talk over the announcements.
Area also.
I've seen about 12 species of sharks so far in the wild. So great hammerheads, bull sharks, Caribbean reef sharks, what else? Nurse sharks. In Australia, there was blacktip reef sharks and whitetip reef sharks, flying sharks and Port Jackson sharks. So I think in total, if I had to add them all up, which is really hard to do, but easily over 100 sharks that I've seen in the wild. And like I said, every encounter I've ever had has been amazing. And the bad part about it is they don't last long enough. The sharks are there, you see them, sometimes you get a good picture or a little bit of video, and then they're gone again. So yeah, lots of sharks, and as a scuba diver, they're one of my favorite things to swim with, to dive with. Good question.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, boys and girls, your teachers as well, thank you so much for being so understanding today. We do try and do things that, when they pay off, work really well, but sometimes Antarctica, sometimes places like Peru, the internet's just not that great. So today the internet won, but I will set up a new hangout with Holly in March. I'll try and set it at the exact same time, and your classrooms will obviously have the first chance to join in that hangout and get to see what Holly's life is like living in the Amazon. So Holly sends her sincerest apologies, but we will connect with her soon. So yeah, I'm just going to thank you so much for hanging out and listening to some of my diving stories. I'm going to turn the mics on if you guys want to say goodbye. And enjoy the rest of the afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.